Have you ever looked at your garden and realized that after all the hard work, all you really have is a handful of expensive lettuce and a lot of empty space? I've been there. I remember spending a fortune on showcase plants that looked amazing at the garden center, but died the moment the weather turned a little harsh. That is the biggest trap in gardening. If you want to actually feed your family, you need to stop growing for the look and start growing for survival. My promise to you today is simple. I'm going to show you how to swap 3 sensitive, high-maintenance plants for 5 resilient crops that can give you a harvest for 12 months straight. In this channel, No Secret Gardening, we don't believe in miracles. We believe in what works when you're busy, tired, or when the weather isn't perfect. Before we dive into the first plant, I want you to memorize our signature rule for this video. No shelter in the soil, no drama in the leaf. If you leave your soil naked and exposed to the sun, your plants will struggle no matter how much you water them. Let's get our hands dirty right away with a practical proof. I call this the midday soil test. Go out to your garden at noon and put the back of your hand directly on the soil. If it feels uncomfortably hot to your skin, it's cooking your plant's roots. This is why most survival gardens fail before they even start. If the soil is scorching, the leaf suffers even with water. To fix this, you need mulch, which is just a fancy word for a blanket of dry leaves or straw. Now, let's talk about our first survival champion, which we need to get in the ground by the 110 mark of our plan, the sweet potato. This isn't just a side dish, it's a calorie powerhouse. Unlike regular potatoes, which can be finicky with pests and soil diseases, sweet potatoes are incredibly tough. In most backyards, they act like a living mulch, spreading their vines across the ground to protect the soil while they build big, energy-dense tubers underground. I learned this the hard way after trying to grow traditional showcase potatoes in a hot climate. They wilted, they got blighted, and I ended up with marble-sized results. When I switched to sweet potatoes, the game changed. You don't even need to buy seeds. You can grow them from slips, which are just sprouts from a tuber you bought at the market. Here is another quick test for you. The leaf firmness check. Early in the morning, touch the leaves of your sweet potato vines. They should feel like a crisp piece of paper. If they feel like soft fabric, even when the soil is damp, your plant is telling you the drainage is wrong. Remember, in our garden, we never allow standing water. We want the soil moist, but always drained. No pooled water ever, because that's how roots rot. Sweet potatoes are the ultimate anti-vitrine plant. They aren't always neat. They will try to take over the space, but that's exactly what you want in a survival scenario. They provide massive amounts of vitamin A and healthy carbs. Usually, you can harvest them after about 4 months, but the best part is that in warmer areas, you can just leave them in the ground and dig them up only when you need them. They are like a natural pantry that lives under the dirt. If you are in a small backyard or even using large pots on a balcony, sweet potatoes still work. You just need to give them a vertical trellis to climb or let them spill over the sides. If you are in a scenario with full sun all day, these are your best friends. They thrive in the heat that kills other plants. But what happens when you need something green? Most people reach for spinach, but spinach is a drama queen that bolts and dies the moment a heat wave hits. If you want to feed your family year-round, you need to look at the master error of choosing seasonal greens over perennial strength. I lost so much money on seeds that lasted only 3 weeks until I discovered the plant I'm going to show you in the next part. I'm also going to reveal the 3-finger moisture test that will save you from the #1 killer of survival crops. You might think you're watering enough, but your plants might still be thirsty at the root level. I'll show you how to be sure. I lost a lot of money until I discovered this next secret about keeping the harvest going without ever buying new seeds. I'll reveal an error in the next part that almost every beginner makes with their survival greens. The error I mentioned before is the supermarket mindset. We are trained to think that if a plant looks perfectly green and shiny, it's healthy. But in a survival garden, that shine often comes from chemicals that won't be there when you really need food. I remember my first survival kale patch. I treated it like a delicate flower, and the first frost turned it into mush. That's when I realized I was growing a showcase variety, not a survival one. You want the tough, ugly varieties like walking stick kale or thousand-headed kale. These aren't just plants, they are vertical food factories. Before we go further, let's perform our second practical proof, the three-finger moisture test. Stop relying on how the surface of the soil looks. Take your index, middle, and ring fingers and dig them 3 inches deep near the base of your plant. If the tip of your middle finger feels bone dry, your plant is starving for a drink, even if the top looks dark. Remember our rule. If the soil is scorching, the leaf suffers even with water. If you find the soil is dry that deep down, you need to double your mulch layer immediately. No shelter in the soil, no drama in the leaf. Now, let's look at our decision map for these hardy greens. If you are in an apartment or have a very small patio, you should be growing in deep pots, at least 12 inches. If you have a backyard, you want to plant these in the partial shade areas where the afternoon sun won't bake them. Kale is known for being an important source of calcium and iron, making it a must-have for food self-sufficiency. Usually, it tends to be much more resilient than lettuce or spinach. In most backyards, a single kale plant can provide leaves for 6 months or more if you harvest only the outer leaves. A common doubt I hear from the no-secret gardening community is, why are my greens wilting even when I water them every day? This is the master error. It usually happens because you are watering the leaves, not the roots, or your soil has no blanket. Without mulch, the water evaporates in minutes, leaving the roots in a sauna. I've made this mistake hundreds of times, thinking more water was the answer, when the real answer was more shade for the soil. If you're feeling overwhelmed by all these details, don't worry. I've put everything I've learned from my years of failures and successes into the guide No Secret Gardening. It's designed to be your protector in the garden, helping you avoid the expensive mistakes I made when I was starting out. It focuses on these real-world techniques that actually put food on your table without the showcase drama. Moving on to our next survival hero, the winter squash. While the sweet potato owns the ground, the squash owns the edges of your garden. It's a crop that provides shelf-stable food. You don't need a fridge. A healthy squash can sit on your kitchen counter for months, but there is a secret to making sure they don't rot on the vine. I see people letting their squash sit directly on the damp earth. That is a fatal error. In my backyard, I always use a cradle of dry straw or even a flat stone to keep the fruit off the soil. This prevents the moisture from the ground from inviting pests into the skin of the squash. It's a 10-second adjustment that saves a 3-pound meal. Usually, the larger varieties like butternut or Hubbard have a stronger nutrient profile and thicker skin, which is what you want for long-term storage. But what about the one plant that almost everyone kills, yet it's the most important for flavoring your survival meals and keeping you healthy? I'm talking about the perennial onion family. Most people buy onion sets that only bulb once, and then they are gone. I'm going to show you a variety that you plant once and harvest forever. I lost a lot of money on seeds until I discovered this infinity crop. In the next part, I'll show you the sprout test to see if your soil is actually alive or just dead dirt, and I'll give you the ultimate 7-day rescue plan for any plant that looks like it's on its last legs. The toughest plant on our list is coming up last for a reason. It's the one that survives even when you forget to water it for a week. How to save a plant that looks dead? The plan starts now. If you've ever walked out to your garden and seen a plant that looks like it's ready for the compost bin, yellowed leaves, drooping stems, and a general look of defeat, don't give up on it just yet. I've seen plants come back from the brink of death more times than I can count. My 7-day rescue plan for an ugly plant is very simple, and it doesn't involve expensive fertilizers. First, you move it to a spot with bright but indirect light, away from the harsh afternoon sun. Second, you check the drainage. If there is standing water, get it out of there. Remember, no standing water, always drained, no pooled water. Third, you apply our golden rule. No shelter in the soil, no drama in the leaf. Cover the base with a thick layer of mulch. Within a week, if the core of the plant is still alive, you will see a tiny bit of green pushing through. That resilience is exactly what we look for in our final survival crop, the walking onion, or its simpler cousin, the perennial green onion. In most backyards, people treat onions as a one-time harvest. You plant a bulb, you wait months, you pull it out, and it's gone. That is a showcase mentality. For a real survival garden, you want the variety that stays in the ground and multiplies itself. I lost a lot of money on onion sets that rotted in the rain before I realized that these perennial versions are practically invincible. You can cut the green tops for seasoning all year long, and the base just keeps growing more. They are an important source of vitamin C and minerals, which are vital when you are focusing on food self-sufficiency. Now, I promised you a way to know if your soil is actually alive or just dead dirt. We call this the sprout test. Take a small handful of birdseed or even a few lentils from your pantry and scatter them in a small patch of your garden soil. Water them lightly and wait. If nothing happens in 3 to 5 days, your soil is dead. It lacks the microbial life needed to support survival crops. If they sprout quickly and look strong, your soil is ready to feed your family. If the sprouts are pale and thin, it's a sign you need more organic matter, like compost or aged leaves, to build up the bank account of your soil. Let's look at our final decision map so you can start planting tomorrow morning based on your specific environment. If you are in a full sun all day scenario, your priority is sweet potatoes and winter squash. These are the tanks of the garden that can handle the heat. If you have partial shade, this is where your survival kale and perennial onions will thrive. They like the light, but appreciate the break from the midday bake. If you are in a pot or apartment setting, focus on the kale and green onions. You can grow a surprising amount of food in deep containers as long as you never allow pooled water in the trays. And if you have a small backyard, use the edges for your squash and the center for your sweet potatoes to create a carpet of edible green. How do you know if all this is actually working? Here is your signs of success checklist. First, when you pull back the mulch, you should see the soil looking darker and feeling cooler than the air around it. Second, you should see new, tiny leaves emerging from the center of your kale and onions every single week. Third, the stems of your squash and sweet potatoes should feel firm and snappy, not soft or rubbery. If you see these 3 things, you have moved past being a visitor in your garden and have become a real grower. I've spent years making the expensive mistakes so you don't have to. I've bought the wrong seeds, ignored the soil temperature, and let my plants drown in standing water. But once you switch from the showcase way of thinking to the survival way of thinking, the stress disappears. You stop worrying about every little yellow spot and start focusing on the massive harvests that are happening right under your feet and behind the big green leaves. If this approach to gardening makes sense to you and you want to protect your family's food supply while finding a bit of peace in the backyard, I'd love for you to join our community. Subscribe to No Secret Gardening and leave a comment below telling me which of these 5 crops you're going to put in the ground first. Sharing this video with a friend who is struggling with their garden is the best way to help us grow together. We are building something real here, away from the filters and the fake perfection of the showcase world. Keep your soil covered, keep your eyes on the new growth, and remember that every mistake is just a lesson in how to grow stronger next season. You've got this, and your garden is waiting to reward your hard work with real, nutritious food. Grow with ease, smarts, and love. See you next time.